Please raise your hand if you intend to vote for Donald Trump for president, even though he is now a convicted felon.
Absolutely.
Everyone on stage is raising their hand.
I do support Donald Trump, but let's remember what happened in 2020. Donald Trump didn't win this state.
Who here believes that if Republican primary voters nominate Ms. Boebert, that she could realistically lose in November? They sent it to committees and said,
the inquiry was sent to committee. It was not blocked.
It was blocked by sending it to committee, so you didn't get the full House vote that you wanted.
No, I did get a full House vote, and it was sent to committee. I apologize.
This is going to be a long evening if you speak over the facts.
Okay, say it right.
You would vote to impeach President Biden over his handling of the southern border. Would you vote to impeach him for that?
I'm a small business owner. I would love to hire some of these folks.
And for you to stand here and just say that you need workers, I think that that is gross.
You've passed no legislation.
Yes, I have.
Mi idioma de nacimiento era español. Yo puedo conectar con la gente.
But there are also many other pieces of legislation that I've passed through the House. And
it doesn't matter if it's passed through the House. If the president doesn't sign it, ma'am,
government, and I'm not going to compromise my principles.
My question is not about what you did while drunk, whether you were telling the truth,
you just had
or
an
whether a
interview
public
recently with
agency was lying about your conduct.
Either way was very.
Do you regret saying that Ms. Boebert, a sitting congresswoman, dresses like a prostitute?
I don't dress for half the tour for the whole
especially at the theater, right? You're really happy with those options, aren't you, ma'am?
This is the highlights for the Republican primary race in the Colorado 4th Congressional District. If you have any questions about the political leanings of the network that is moderating the debate, this was the introduction they started it off with.
Colorado Republicans have a choice. At their most powerless point since World War II is the path back in Colorado, aligning themselves completely with newly convicted felon Donald Trump, or going in a different direction, purging the party of people willing to work across the aisle or being open to compromise. That is the choice for voters in the Republican primary for Colorado's 4th Congressional District.
As far as the debate itself, they definitely tried to make it the Lauren Boebert show. Boebert is currently representing a different district in the state, which she would be unlikely to win again if she had run in that district. And now she's trying to represent the 4th district in Colorado. This seat is considered a pretty solid Republican seat. So regardless of who wins this primary, it's expected that it will be a Republican in Congress from the district. Overall, I'm not sure how much it's going to sway an individual's vote, but it's a pretty entertaining debate, and here are the rest of the highlights.
Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, who currently represents Colorado's 3rd Congressional District on the Western Slope, but has moved to Windsor to run in the 4th. Logan County Commissioner and former state lawmaker Jerry Sonnenberg. Conservative activist and former talk radio host Deborah Flora from Douglas County. State Representative Richard Holtorf from Akron. 3-time congressional candidate and mortgage broker Peter Yu from Windsor, and former State House Minority Leader, State Representative Mike Lynch of Wellington. Former President Donald Trump is now a convicted felon. Convicted today on 34 felony counts for falsifying business records to influence the 2016 election by covering up a hush money payment made to a porn actress after an affair. Please raise your hand if you intend to vote for Donald Trump for president, even though he is now a convicted felon.
Absolutely.
Everyone on stage is raising their hand.
Mr. Holtorf, you have said that Republicans will continue to lose in Colorado if you are hogtied to Donald Trump. You've said Colorado is not a Trump state, and that won't change. Saying those kinds of things these days can get a man labeled a rhino and run out of your party. So I'm curious, are you saying that you would defy Donald Trump's wishes and vote against any of his priorities in Congress, or just not talk about him as much?
Well, thank you, Kyle, for the question. Let's talk about what just happened. Donald Trump being convicted in a lower court. That's certainly going to get appealed. I do support Donald Trump, but let's remember what happened in 2020. Donald Trump didn't win this state. So does that mean Donald Trump does not control the state and have supremacy over the state? I would say that there's more unaffiliated voters in this state, and the unaffiliated truly outnumber the Republicans.
What do you say to people who argue that any one of your primary opponents here can ably represent conservative values in Congress, but not offer the risk of losing the seat to Democrats?
First of all, I'm not trusting any internal polls that are secretly released by a Democrat campaign. And I think the Democrat who released that internal poll needs to be focused on his own primary, which he is scheduled to lose to his opponent, Trish. We have a special election that is taking place in Colorado on June 25th, and she has a huge advantage being the Democrat nominee for that special election. I do believe that Greg Lopez will ultimately win that special election, and we all need to get out that vote. In Colorado's 3rd district, we did have a very close election, but we also had 50,000 Republicans not show up to vote. And maybe it's because those Republicans were frustrated at other elected Republicans who have failing conservative records, who refuse to stand with President Trump, and they felt abandoned statewide and nationwide.
Can you specifically outline for voters what you are talking about when you're referring to Ms. Boebert's drama and divisive antics, and do you really think it could lose a safe seat like this?
Thank you for the question, Kyle. I mean, the reality is CD4 has been redistricted. It is now a 73% suburban, 49% unaffiliated district. I have traveled all over the 21 counties and will work very hard to represent the rural areas as well. But with this change, and with CD3 being 65% rural, this is almost a mirror opposite. As I've traveled all over listening to voters, so many of the unaffiliated voters are Republicans who've left the party because they're tired of the purge and purify, the drama and the dysfunction. And many also are unaffiliated voters who do not understand, because no one has persuaded them that our policies are the very things that will solve the issues that keep them up at night. I do think it is vulnerable. I think the day of that will never happen in Colorado is long gone.
Do you share Ms. Flora's view that the safest Republican seat in Colorado could be up for grabs if your party nominates Ms. Boebert?
So, Kyle, thank you for the question. Colorado's electorate has changed. We need to accept that. Colorado used to be a red state. Then it became a purple state. Some people claim that Colorado is now a blue state. If you look at the state house that I served in, 46-19, that's pretty blue. If you look at the electorate, the elected officials in there. So yes, we have to be sensitive to the changes of Colorado.
Who here believes that if Republican primary voters nominate Ms. Boebert, that she could realistically lose in November? Mr. Lynch, Ms. Flora, and Mr. Yu say they believe that she could realistically lose. Mr. Sonnenberg, Mr. Holtorf do not believe that she could realistically lose.
Let me clarify.
November.
I answered the question, so I didn't know.
Okay.
You wanted.
Do you believe that she could lose in November?
It's very possible. Yes.
Okay,
I'm going to raise my hand just to clarify. It's possible.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Boebert. An opportunity to respond to what they've said.
Yes. Well, it's interesting to hear Democrat talking points from my Republican opponents talking about this purge and purify process in the Republican Party. We just want people who are elected who actually represent our values.
Ms. Boebert, you're running an ad right now that says deport them all. That would be an enormous, unprecedented government action. So if you would please describe in detail how you see mass deportation playing out in the cities and towns of the 4th Congressional District, and include, if you would, who you think should be doing the rounding up, where folks would be detained before they're deported, and so forth.
First of all, having over 10 million illegal aliens coming into our country in under 4 years, this is unprecedented, and this is a massive lift from the federal government. When you have Joe Biden's administration flying illegal aliens from our border, from Central America into our interior, this is a problem. If they can fly them in, they can certainly fly them out. If buses can bring them in, buses can bring them out. We have got to secure the border, and Congress needs to use the power of the purse as leverage to get that finished and actually secure the southern border. We are impacted by this in Colorado with fentanyl overdoses, with having to defund our law enforcement officers, our firefighters. These are important jobs where funding is being cut because of the illegal aliens and the invasion that is taking place.
I'll note that you didn't make any attempt to answer the actual question, which is who should be doing this? It would be an unprecedented government action. Who should go into Windsor or to Parker?
If the federal government is flying them in and busing them in, they can bus them out. They can fly them out. And certainly we have agents that can help assist in that. But before anything else, we have got to secure the border and shut it down. I have talked.
When you say federal agents, do you mean just Border Patrol, just ICE, or are you talking about?
If we need to use the National Guard, whatever it takes to keep our country safe.
How about local police, as Mr. Trump has said?
Anything to get our country back to some sort of normal is fine with me. And whatever President Trump puts out there, I certainly will talk with him and help enforce that.
Thank you very much. As you referenced, you introduced articles of impeachment against the president for his handling of the border. That move was blocked by Republican House leadership. They sent it to committees and said,
the inquiry was sent to committee. It was not blocked.
It was blocked by sending it to committee, so you didn't get the full House vote that you wanted.
No, I did get a full House vote, and it was sent to committee. I apologize.
This is going to be a long evening if you speak over the facts.
Say it right.
So a question for everybody up here. Please raise your hand if, based on what you know now, you would vote to impeach President Biden over his handling of the southern border. Would you vote to impeach him for that? Everyone but Mr. Yu.
What specific bold changes would you make in immigration law?
Yeah, well, I thank you. And I appreciate listening to the words of people that have never really passed a law here on the stage, to include Ms. Boebert and
I have
Ms.
passed
Flora.
Laws. Thank you.
And out of
no, and been signed into law. Thank you. My Pueblo Jobs Act has been signed into law.
That we would just blanketly go after. We have a number of migrants that come into our state every year to work in our fields. So if we just blindly start rounding people up and sending them across the border, we run the risk of seriously impacting our ag community in this state. I'm a small business owner. I would love to hire some of these folks. If we didn't legislate in the state of Colorado that I can't afford to hire them. So it's not just like round them up and go with the talking point of let's just throw them out of the country. We need to legislate. That's what we're asking for right here.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Lynch, how many of these 10+ million illegal aliens have visas? We are not talking about visa holders here. And I understand that you are promoting this indentured servitude and do not want people to come here and live the American dream. I've been to naturalization ceremonies, and coming here the right way is the most precious thing that our country offers. Yeah. It is so generous that we allow 1 million immigrants to come into our country, and they take that very seriously. Yeah. And for you to stand here and just say that you need workers, I think that is gross, and it is nowhere near on point. You're talking about visas, and that system is broken and needs some repair, but these 10 million illegals do not have them.
Congresswoman Boebert,
I would love to see, Congresswoman, your legislation that you've done to do this. What is it? Because you have passed nothing.
We are in divided government, and I have passed legislation out of the House of Representatives. I work in the House of Representatives, not in the Senate, and I'm not in the executive branch. But I have passed legislation to secure our border.
No legislation.
Yes, I have. And to defund sanctuary cities. I have passed over 70 amendments to the House floor, a process that I fought to make available in the House of Representatives, something that hasn't happened in over a decade.
Because we don't want to have
Mr. Lynch, thank you very much. Mr.
a boxing match here.
Do you believe that mass deportation outweighs those economic risks?
Thank you for the question, Kyle. And quite honestly, when it comes right down to it, mass deportation that I'm talking about is shipping the ones that have been bussed into Denver, bus them back out and getting them back out. And to answer the question earlier, absolutely. I would use the police. I would use the National Guard. Those people aren't the ones working. Those people are the ones causing the crime to go up in Denver and the area around. Imagine, if you will.
Do you have any evidence to support that? Because law enforcement has not put that forward. I'm just curious where you're getting that causation.
I'm looking at the correlation between the crime rate going up and the immigrants coming in at the same time. Just looking at those two rising at the same time.
That's happening in Texas because a Republican governor has mobilized the Guard in that way. Democratic governor in Colorado is not going to do that. So the options would be send in the U.S. military or have a future President Trump nationalize the Guard under the Insurrection Act and say, bring in guardsmen from out of state into Douglas County. You think that would work?
I think that it is time that we take it very seriously for what it is.
Would you like to answer the question?
I will, because I do think
somebody that's
Mr. Holtorf, you've been interrupting people constantly. I would ask you to stop. Ms. Flora, could you please answer the question?
Yes.
Bringing an out-of-state National Guardsman or the U.S. military in Douglas County, Do you feel like that would work?
Not into Douglas County. That's not what I'm talking about. What I mentioned is to secure our border. That is what is required. And we also, by the way, have to stop the President of the United States from suing border states who are doing their own work.
We're going to move on. The question was about the actual work of rounding people up in Douglas County. But we took a couple tries at that.
There is deportation happening in Colorado. Mayor Johnston is doing it because he says he can't afford the illegals that they've invited in.
He's not deporting anybody. He's certainly offering people onward
telling people we will secure a bus and
for the
get you
folks
out.
Here, there's actually two military members here. First of all, nobody here may know, and I know, Kyle, you don't know, Marshall, you don't know, that my father was an immigrant. My father came from Spain. I was born in Spain. Yo hablo español. Mi idioma de nacimiento era español. Yo puedo conectar con la gente que están inmigrantes. You guys don't know this, but I do. Okay, first of all, let's talk about immigration. It's very complex. And there's a lot of people here that want to be in this country, that want to become U.S. citizens, and many of them should have the right, just like my father.
You've said providing temporary legal status for those children, DACA, is a draw for more illegal immigration. The program is currently frozen by a court. Should DACA recipients, so-called dreamers, keep their temporary status and stay? Should they be put on a pathway to citizenship, or should they lose their status and be deported?
So when it comes to basically DACA and our dreamers, I do believe that there should be a pathway to citizenship, but for those who have basically been here for X amount of years, for those who have basically come recently, I do not agree, because some of them don't even have a court date until 2031, which would be 7 to 8 years down the road. So for those who have been in our country in the past, who brought here, this is the only country they know, I am open to that idea, but also open to the idea that they are actually law-abiding citizens, that they are contributing to society, and that they are respectable parts of our community.
You get to ask one of your colleagues here a question.
You know, that opportunity arose at the last or at the very first debate, and I chose not to do a gotcha question to any of the other candidates. I'd rather talk about my issues, so I'm going to decline to send a question to any of my other opponents.
Understandable. Again, I know at that debate you were told that doesn't have to be quote-unquote gotcha, but I will accept the time back. Ms. Flora, you may ask a question of someone else.
Jerry, you and I have always taken the higher ground. I only want to ask questions that deal with policy. So I do have a question. As we've talked about, Denver is being overwhelmed by tens of thousands of illegal immigrants. They're lured here by the promise of food, housing, cell phones, and even driver's license. You've been one of the few Republicans that has actually voted for driver's license for non-citizens. What is your thought about the responsibility that may play into incentivizing those desperate people to be coming to these cities?
That's a great question, Deb, and thank you for asking, because quite honestly, the motive behind voting for that bill and supporting that bill was so we know where they're at. We know who's here, why they're here, and where they're located.
How many bills did you prime sponsor? I said 38 I prime sponsored, not co-sponsor, because you can co-sponsor post facto. Anybody can put their name on a bill after it passes. How many bills did you prime sponsor in the U.S. Congress that actually were signed by the President of the United States?
So thank you so much, Richard. You know, it's interesting that you're touting the legislation that you have passed. You also say that you are a no-nonsense conservative. Well, I think the voters back home should know that a no-nonsense conservative should not have a failing Liberty score. We have the Independent Institute who scores representatives for their legislative record. And if you are not voting how you campaign, well, then you get a negative impact. And I'm the only person.
Would you like to answer the question, or would you like to talk about Liberty scores? You can answer the question, ma'am. It's okay.
Will. So,
I asked a very specific question. Please answer.
One of my favorite pieces of legislation that has been signed into law is my Pueblo Jobs Act that creates at least 1,000 jobs in Pueblo, Colorado. We worked to incorporate the BRAC process, so nearly $7 billion in infrastructure would not be bulldozed and go to waste. But there are also many other pieces of legislation that I've passed through the House. And
it doesn't matter if it's passed through the House. If the President doesn't sign it, ma'am,
government, and I'm not going to compromise my principles to just pass a bill
that
Thank does not honor.
I would give you one more opportunity if you would like to answer his question, which is the number of bills you've prime sponsored that have been signed by the President.
So my Pueblo Jobs Act has been signed into law.
A number, please.
That is one.
Got it. If parents were to take your advice seriously and pull all the kids out of public schools, what would America without a public education system look like?
You know, the situation, Kyle, is I'm very proud of the work that I've been doing on school choice. That means other choices than just government-controlled schools. And I have to say, it's one of the things I've been fighting for, parental rights, school choice, which benefits many. And it's a very personal situation for me. Our daughter was diagnosed with autism, and she began to struggle going from a straight-A student to almost flunking out. If we had not had the opportunity for something other than a government-run school, I don't know where she would be today. My goal and my statement for that was it is the right of every single parent, and I will stand for the right of every single parent to have that same choice for other opportunities.
My question is not about what you did while drunk, which for anybody who missed it was speeding up I-25 at 90 miles per hour so fast a trooper thought that you were trying to race him. Then you reached for your gun during the traffic stop. You asked the trooper to call the State Patrol's lobbyist. Then you asked him to keep the arrest out of the media. My question to you is about what you did while sober. You did not disclose your drunk driving arrest to your Republican colleagues when they were considering you for leader and electing you.
Yeah.
What does that tell voters about your judgment?
Well, thank you, Kyle, for that. I mean, I think this is a little bit of you guys being a little sore because you didn't catch this for, quite some time. This was all public knowledge, right? So I didn't disclose, I didn't hide anything from anybody. And I'll be honest with you, I had 2 seniors in high school at that time, and they didn't need to go through that publicity. I also was not even elected to that position at that time. So, that was a personal decision. No doubt. I own that. That was a bad mistake. Should not have done it.
Was it a mistake not to tell your colleagues when they were considering you for leader, knowing that you had something so big and embarrassing in your recent past?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, this happened, at a time that was, this was before even we had theater incidents or anything else that was embarrassing to folks. And so, serving in public life is hard work. And exposing your life to it is, a personal decision, and I chose not to.
That was about the softest reference that he could have made, but do you want to talk about the theater thing?
Sure. So, Kyle, I certainly have owned up to my night out in Denver, and I've gone on that public apology tour, and I'm grateful for the mercy and grace that has been shown. But I'm not going to continue to live life in shame and be beat up by this. And I would like to go back to my legislative record for just a second.
We're not going to do that. You had plenty of time to answer the question. You chose not to.
Sure.
That's fine. I just want to make sure.
I'll have more time.
And you have
Don't
apologized for the theater incident.
I certainly have.
And I just want to make sure. Did you apologize for the behavior that went on with you and your date or the vaping,
Kyle,
or did you
apologize?
Apologize for lying to voters about what you did that night and the disrespect that you showed to service workers that night? What specifically were you apologizing for?
I don't believe there was disrespect. There were things that were absolutely taken out of context.
There's video of your interactions with service workers. I'm asking.
Right.
Are you apologizing for the lying to voters
that I
or
flipped
the
someone off, and I did not. So I mean, I think it's been very mischaracterized. I'm apologizing for you, Kyle Clark, getting footage and releasing that. And people seeing this in a very private moment.
Certainly. It was very important to figure out whether you were telling the truth
you just had an
or whether a
interview
public
recently with
agency was lying about your conduct.
You just had an
very
interview with
important
CityCast Denver, and you were saying how disgusting it is to record someone without their knowledge.
Let's talk about the use of earmarks in Congress.
You did that very same thing and released it to the world.
Members request, will you participate in the earmark process if elected to Congress?
Absolutely.
That is a yes from Mr. Lynch, Mr. Holtorf. Pardon me, please allow me to say these people's names, okay? Mr. Lynch, Mr. Holtorf, Mr. Sonnenberg. A no on earmarks from Mr. Yu.
It depends.
It depends from Ms. Flora. Okay. If you were the deciding vote, would you still have voted no and killed all of those projects in Colorado that you now take credit for?
Yes, and I would have worked for a process. I would have worked for a process to get those over the line, but I worked to get those in, and I have had over 80 initiatives signed into law through the appropriations process.
I appreciate the direct answer. Thank you very much.
The Independence Institute called it a massive tax increase and mockingly named you their 2017 Californian of the Year for, quote, destroying Tabor and denying Coloradans a vote on taxes. The question is, do you regret doing that? And can conservatives trust you to hold the line on taxes given your record?
Thank you for the question, Marshall, and absolutely I would do it again. If you know, 2009, they put the hospital provider fee in place. That's used to leverage money from the federal government to take care of those people that they have to take care of, that hospitals are required to take care of. In 2017, the Colorado Joint Budget Committee in the legislature decided to balance the budget on the backs of those hospitals and take that money away, so hospitals could not have the money they were required to have from the federal government to be able to service those people. So all I did is moved it from one side to another to a separate fund so they could no longer balance the budget on the backs of those hospitals, those private hospitals, those rural hospitals. It's one thing if you're in Douglas County and you drive 5 minutes to a hospital or 7 minutes to a hospital. It's another thing if you live in Carville and you close the hospital at Hugo and you're an hour and a half away when you have chest pains.
You told a State House colleague who had lost his son in the Aurora Theater shooting that he needed to let go of his son's murder. You called a legislator of color buckwheat during a floor debate. You suggested that people with disabilities are like people who took the risk of running with the bulls in Pamplona. And you suggested that Miss Boebert dresses like a prostitute. Do you regret saying any of those things? And why do you talk to people like that?
Kyle, thank you for the question. Most people know that I'm a straight, no-nonsense conservative. And I say things that oftentimes are misinterpreted or misunderstood. But with respect to one incident, Representative Ortiz, who I was talking to, Eastern Texas country boy, Eastern Colorado country boy, we're friends. We serve as co-chairs in the State House on the Veterans Caucus, brothers in arms. So he was not offended by that comment. Okay, he actually understood me when we had that. But I don't want to talk about that. Let me tell you what I want to talk about.
Well, actually, no, this isn't free swim. I ask a question, you answer.
Please allow me to finish.
Let me just ask you. The question was, do you regret saying any of those things? And why do you speak to people that way? Do you regret saying that Ms. Boebert, a sitting congresswoman, dresses like a prostitute?
So allow me to explain. I have 5 daughters, okay? I raised 5 daughters. And I'll tell you what, women, in my humble opinion, particularly if they're a congresswoman, need to dress respectfully and professionally. Okay, there's times when we've been on the campaign trail.
Thank you. That's time. Ms. Boebert, would you like to quickly respond to Mr. Holtorf's dress code for women?
I don't think that I have a comment on his dress code. I'm happy for with my clothing options, and I don't dress for half the torf or the whole.
Especially at the theater, right? You're really happy with those options, aren't you, ma'am?
Mr.
Those
Holtorf,
were awesome.
Thank you. Mr. Holtorf, thank you.
Thank you.
Please raise your hand if you believe that elections across the country will be conducted fairly and accurately.
I'm sorry, did you say across the country?
Across the country.
Okay, thank you.
Not one hand is raised.
Wait, I'm sorry.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Raise your hand if you think elections across the country will be conducted fairly and accurately.
Were they?
I think most of them will be.
So we see a hand from Mr. Sonnenberg, a hand from Ms. Flora, Mr. Yu, and a late hand from Mr. Lynch.
Knowing what you know now, would you vote the same way that Ms. Boebert voted then to overturn the 2020 election results? And I'm going to start with Ms. Boebert. Knowing what you know now versus what you know then, would you change that vote or would you vote the same way? Please just a yes or no so we can get to everybody. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Lynch, would you vote the same way? You would not have voted to overturn the 2020 election. Mr. Holtorf?
No.
Mr. Sonnenberg?
No, I would not have voted to overturn the election.
Ms. Flora?
I would not have voted to overturn.
Mr. Yu?
No.
All right, so just for the record, Ms. Boebert voted to overturn the 2020 election.
Objected
She's the
to
only
the
one
Electoral
there.
College certification.
The only one up here who said that she would also make that same vote today. Let's do some more candidates.
Congresswoman, 0 bills passed, 24 votes missed, fewer comments, and I appreciate the fact that you have taken over my campaign slogan of delivering for Colorado. But can you tell me how you actually have delivered anything?
Yes.
For the state of Colorado.
Thank you.
That has been signed in and is actually actionable from what you've done.
I understand that Democrat congressional campaigner Adam Frisch, you have his old campaign manager. And these are her talking points. I get that, but we're not at zero.
These are facts.
We are not at zero for legislation passed. I have passed my.
It's Googleable.
Let's let her answer the question.
I have passed my Pueblo Jobs Act that's been signed into law, but I've also passed over 80 other initiatives that have been signed into law. One single standalone bill is not the only way to get something signed into law. And I have over 80 initiatives that have been signed into law, whether that be through the amendment process, the appropriations process, or through the congressionally directed spending.
Unaffiliates and even moderate-leaning constituents do not know you, don't like you. And are you ever going to make an attempt to talk to anyone outside the Republican Party?
Don't know me or don't approve of me? Because those are two very different things that you're saying
Okay,
here.
so basically it's actually it's one and the same because they don't know you, and the ones that do know you.
It sounded like the question was, are you going to talk to anybody outside the Republican Party?
Absolutely, and I do on a regular basis. I enjoy meeting with people. I have lived a life of service, from McDonald's to serving people through my church in the local jail, these at-risk women, and also in my restaurant. I love engaging with people. That is my favorite thing in life, and so I absolutely do connect and bridge the unaffiliated and the Republican voters. That is why I've been able to successfully get bipartisan legislation passed through the House without compromising my principles, working with Senators Bennett and Hickenlooper even to have co-sponsoring legislation in the Senate for my initiatives. And my legislation comes from conversations with people in the district, meeting with county commissioners, even in blue counties or blue cities, meeting with their council members. And that is where my legislative ideas come from. And I put pen to paper and get them passed.
Thank you, Ms. Boebert. You get to keep talking because you get the last question to another candidate.
Sure. Peter, you and I are the only two here on this stage who have won a congressional primary. And, one thing that I really love and respect about you is the work that you were putting to talk to people that usually don't show up to a Republican event. I have lots of ideas on how to get more people to events, but you are doing a great job of going door to door and meeting with people one-on-one and talking about the issues. And so, Peter, my question to you would be, how do you intend to take all of that wonderful work that you're doing and communicating with unaffiliated voters and even Democrats and make promises that you would still not compromise any of our Republican Party principles?
That's a great question. And the one thing I've always made clear is that I am a conservative. Everyone always asks me at the door, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat? And I'm proud to be able to say I'm a strong conservative Republican. But I also want them to understand that it's amazing when you have conversation. We all want the same thing, regardless if you're Republican or Democrat. We all want to make sure we have a good job, be able to put a roof over our head, be able to put food on the table, be able to take care of our friends and family. We all want the same thing. It's just a different ideology on how we accomplish those things. And it's amazing when you spend half an hour talking to a Democrat who is screaming at you in their driveway, how you actually mend those fences, and you're actually able to come to a conclusion that, guess what, we actually do want the same thing.
Peter, are we in an ice age currently?
We are.
Thank you all.
We are. Are we not in an interglacial ice age right now? Yes.
I did not expect us to end there.